Throughout this project, I've integrated technologies, learnt new skills, and feel as though I've developed a much better understanding of the process of pre-production, production, and post-production. My main task was to create a front page, double page spread, and contents page for a new magazine. I'd never made a magazine before, and although I had some experience with Photoshop, I was unfamiliar with most of the different technologies that I'd be using. For my preliminary task, I made a college magazine. I began by doing a flat plan to sort of decide the layout of my magazine. This came from research I did online, looking at magazines and establishing what the conventions are of a front page. So things like the masthead, the cover lines, using a barcode. I try to put as much detail into this part of the process as possible to make my product look as convincing as possible. Using various online resources and in particular Google Images, I was able to find a host of different magazines that I could refer to in this research phase. I learned the basics of using a DSLR camera, understanding aperture, ISO, and shutter speed to take my photograph. And um, although when I took my photograph, I shot a model against a brick wall, I realised that choosing a plain background would have been a better idea. However, I was happy with the exposure that I got of the image and gave me a bit more confidence in using a DSLR camera. I used some basic Photoshop skills to manipulate my image um, by selecting image adjustments. I was able to change things like the brightness and the contrast, as well as the exposure. It was only a basic exercise that I employed, and I wasn't able to remove the background, which is something I would have liked to have done, but later learned to do. I also learned how to find fonts. I wanted to choose particular fonts for my magazine by using sites like DaFont or 1001 free fonts. I was able to download fonts and then import them into InDesign, which was incredibly useful. On InDesign, I learned how to create a picture box, import an image, and then fit it proportionally. This is quite easy, as I now know how to do it, right-clicking into the image and then clicking fit content proportionally. This ensures that the image is not squashed or distorted in any way. To create my masthead, I used the text tool to create a text frame. I was then able to rotate that text frame so that I could create a side banner masthead. I also adjusted the kerning and the aspect to bring the letters together so that they formed more of a block. I've also learned how you can increase the thickness of the font, so that was really useful. In creating the cover lines, I learned that it was important to create separate text boxes for the different words, as this gives you a greater flexibility to be able to put words together, create satisfying blocks. I also learned that one of the skills of designing a magazine is to understand the need for different font sizes and styles. I was very happy with my college magazine. I definitely feel like it could have been improved. And as I moved on to doing my main task, I felt my skills developed a lot further. For my main task, I decided to create a fashion magazine aimed at a young female audience. I looked at other genres as well to see if I could create a magazine that would have a broader appeal. And in the end, I made what one might imagine is a hybrid magazine of fashion and lifestyle. I looked at fashion magazines. My research had become a lot more focused. I began to do textual analyses of magazines, learning that they tend to use a 3-colour palette, learning about strap lines, using drop caps, gutters, and pull quotes. So my research skills developed much better. I also carried out an online survey with my students to find out what it is that they would like, and I began to understand the importance of knowing who your target audience is so that you can aim your product and create things that would appeal to that audience. There are a lot of skills I learnt using InDesign and Photoshop. With InDesign, one of the skills that I was really happy to learn was text wrapping. Um, so the idea that you can get text that follows around the contour of an image, which I did for my double page spread. I also learnt to use and create drop caps as well as pull quotes, and then adding extra little details like page numbers, etc. Another useful tool that I learned to use was placeholder text. So this is where you can create a text box, and once you create the text box, you can choose the number of columns in the text box, which was really useful. For my double page spread, I worked on a 4-column double page spread. When I created the text boxes, I was able to right click into the box, select placeholder text, and the text box would fill with text. I could choose the font size and the font style of that text, and thereby I could get a word count of what I'd need to write for my article. As far as manipulating my main image as well as my contents page and double page spread images on Photoshop, I felt like my skill in using Photoshop really developed, especially in using the Magic Wand tool and the Quick Selection tool to remove the background of the images. This can sometimes leave the image looking a bit rough around the edges, but by using a gradient tool I was able to soften the edges and create what I hope is a good front cover image without a fussy background, so that the focus is on the actors. Some of my shots were a little bit overexposed, so again I used the adjustments for the image to correct the exposure, and I also used the 3-colour wheel to adjust the colours and add a slight green tinge, especially to my double page spread image. As far as the photography was concerned, this was an area that I felt made a big difference in my magazine. I'd become much better at using my DSLR camera, and I did a studio shoot where I had controlled use of lighting, and I could decide on the pose that my models would take, which would fit into the magazine. I tried to have the ISO as low as possible so that the image would be as sharp as possible, and I was very pleased with the outcome. The images did still need to be adjusted in Photoshop, as I mentioned before, but it was a lot easier to do with images that were of a high quality. Overall, I'm really happy with my magazine, um, finding a decent font for my masthead, allowing myself to be inspired by the research that I did, and then having the skills to be able to put together a magazine that I feel succeeds. From doing flat plans to designing drafts on InDesign to creating the finished product, I feel that I have learnt many new skills in research, pre-production, production, and post-production, and I feel that in many ways I have now become a prosumer, and look forward to next year and carrying on my learning. Thank you for listening.